Hello everyone, this is Afternoon Live. I'm Simon McCoy in Westminster, where Theresa May is beginning a two-week campaign to rally support for her withdrawal agreement with the EU ahead of a crucial Commons vote next month. In around half an hour's time, Mrs May will argue her case here in the Commons, where she faces a tough battle to get the deal approved. She's to tell MPs that rejecting the deal will be risky and lead to division and uncertainty. Labour and the other opposition parties have promised to vote against it, and many of her own MPs are expected to join them. Our political correspondent Ian Watson has this report.
Is this really a good deal for Britain?
Yeah.
Why do you think so? Will you get it through Parliament?
Yeah, it delivers on Brexit.
24 hours after a deal was sealed in Brussels, some cabinet ministers were upbeat that it would now be backed here in Britain. And some long-standing Leave campaigners are now giving the deal their vocal approval.
It's very important that we back the Prime Minister. She secured a good deal for Britain, and it will mean that we will be able to control our borders, we'll be in charge of immigration, we'll be outside the Common Fisheries Policy and outside the Common Agriculture Policy.
And that's a script that cabinet ministers are expected to stick to, that the deal delivers on the government's promises. This will be put to the test in Parliament when MPs get their say on or around the 12th of December. Behind closed doors here, the Cabinet is discussing the Brexit deal. Now, we know that some of them don't like it, but in public at least, they're likely to go along with it. But 86 members of Theresa May's own party have told us that they're unlikely to support her deal. Now, some of them might simply abstain rather than vote against. She has a huge job to convince them, but over the next few weeks, her secret weapon, if you like, is you.
The Prime Minister, Theresa May.
You'll be seeing a lot more of the Prime Minister on broadcast and social media. Her hope is the public will push their politicians to get on with Brexit and back her deal.
I think all MPs will be wrestling with their consciences over the next 2 weeks and thinking hard about what their constituents actually want in a situation like this.
The thing is that anything could happen if this deal doesn't get through, and that's my concern. That's why I want to back this agreement and urge all my colleagues to do the same. Thank you very much.
But we know that many Brexiteers on the Conservative backbenches have already made their minds up about the deal, and some of those who backed Remain are prepared to vote the deal down in the hope of getting a new referendum.
So it needs to go back to the British people with all the information available to them, and that they have that final say, which I think increasingly they are demanding.
And Labour rejects the Prime Minister's argument that it's her deal or no deal and are prepared to let it fall.
It's obvious she's struggling. She needs a plan B, she needs an option A, and just to march on to crash in this vote without an alternative is not good enough.
But a small number of Labour MPs haven't ruled out backing the government.
So the job of the government is to look across the chamber and find a majority of MPs who will support a deal so that we can still accept the outcome of the referendum but make sure that we leave in a way that does the least economic damage to our country.
As Westminster prepares for the festive season, if MPs do reject the Prime Minister's deal just 2 weeks before Christmas, expect the season of goodwill to be put on hold. Ian Watson, BBC News.
Well, our Brussels reporter Adam Fleming says European politicians are now watching Westminster very closely.
That also Westminster phrase, the meaningful vote, is common parlance here in Brussels now, and everyone knows the big characters on the backbenches like Jacob Rees-Mogg, and everyone will be watching to see what happens, what arguments are raised, what criticisms are made of the Prime Minister, who stands up for the deal that she negotiated here with the EU, and ultimately what the result of the meaningful vote is, which Brussels expects to take place in the week of the 10th of December. Then they're still planning, they're going full steam ahead with what happens next. There's a meeting of European Affairs Ministers tabled for the 18th of December, who will then pass the deal ratified by the British Parliament over to the European Parliament for them to ratify. So everyone is acting as if it's going to go through. You talk to people privately in the pub or over a coffee, and diplomats will speculate about the chances and the parliamentary arithmetic. But the official policy of the EU is to not speculate, not to raise what-if questions. And in fact, yesterday, none of the 27 other leaders, when they had their meeting with Theresa May, even asked her what was going to happen or even started raising the concept of any kind of plan B. And of course, as we heard 100 times yesterday from the special summit sealing the deal, as far as the EU is concerned, is closed, non-negotiable, final offer.
Adam Fleming there in Brussels. Well, our chief political correspondent Vicky Young is at Central Lobby inside the House of Parliament and joins us. Vicky.
Yeah, and Theresa May is going to start that selling of her deal this afternoon here in the House of Commons. Now, of course, she has answered questions here many times in the last couple of weeks, and she hasn't had overwhelming backing, certainly not from the opposition parties, and on her own benches too. There is certainly a split in opinion. Now, there are various numbers knocking around about how many Conservative MPs are against her deal, but there are also many who are still undecided. They have just over 2 weeks to make up their minds. One of them is Daniel Kaczynski, who is with me now. What is it that would persuade you to back the deal that Theresa May has got?
Well, I'm still undecided because I've promised my local party members in Shrewsbury that I will engage with them over the coming weeks, and we have the first of those meetings coming up later on this week. I want to hear at first hand what my party members think and also my constituents. But for me, the most important issue is the Irish backstop. We have to ensure that no part of the United Kingdom is ever treated differently to the rest of our country. The DUP our partners are making a real issue out of this because they think that if the backstop is required, it would mean a different regulatory framework for them in the Northern Ireland than for the rest of the United Kingdom. Now, I'm old enough to remember when we have gone to war in the Falkland Islands to protect the rights of British citizens, and there are many people who think that this is the thin end of the wedge. Will we exert ourselves as a sovereign nation state after Brexit, or will we continue to allow the European Union to interfere and regulate different parts of our country in a different way? That is too far for me, and unless the Prime Minister can renegotiate that, I find it very difficult to support the deal.
Now, the EU is making it very clear that the withdrawal agreement, which contains that so-called Irish backstop, that is closed. That cannot be renegotiated. That has been signed off. The only thing that maybe could move a bit would be the political declaration, but not the withdrawal agreement. So what do you say to that?
Well, it would be very surprising if the European Union stated this is our deal for now until your Parliament rejects it. Of course they're going to say that there is no more leeway. I wouldn't expect anything else from the European Union. This is how negotiations take place. But I think what the Prime Minister will find very interesting is the number of Conservative MPs who, like me, are prepared to swallow almost everything else. Although we're not happy with the deal, we may be persuaded to swallow almost everything else. But the issue of a part of our country being treated in a different way to the rest is something that many of us find completely unacceptable. I don't think any country on the planet would accept for part of its sovereign territory to be adjudicated on in a different way by a foreign power. I don't know of any precedent for that, and that's why we have to stand shoulder to shoulder with the DUP on this. I don't always agree with the DUP, and sometimes I think that they can be unreasonable, but on this it's a very important issue.
We'll invite you back on the day of the vote to find out what you're going to do. Thank you very much indeed, Daniel Kaczynski there. So Theresa May due to stand up in the Commons in the next half hour or so, and to start selling that deal to those on her own side as well as others in the House of Commons chamber.
Vicky, thank you very much. That's Vicky Young inside the Houses of Parliament there. Well, here we are. As you can see, the banners are back out. Now, we're actually on a platform this week. There it is. That's the platform. And what they've done is they've managed to get extension poles for their banners. So for those of you tweeting me and saying, how on earth do you let that happen? Nothing we can do to stop it if that's what they're doing. So just to explain that, let's talk now more about what we're expecting in the House of Commons. Anna Menon is from UK and a Changing Europe. And, well, we know that Theresa May has a very tough fight ahead of her. Let's just talk about the options if she doesn't get her deal through.
Well, the simple answer is no one knows what happens then. There's a lot of talk about her bringing it back, which is perfectly entitled to do. One argument is the deal falls, the markets panic, she brings it back a week later and says, would you like to reconsider? That might or it might not work. The other options then are what Parliament can manage to salvage out of this. We are legally obliged to leave the European Union on the 29th of March at the moment. It's written in statute. So the question is whether Parliament not only has a majority for anything else, which is far from certain. I mean, Parliament opposes everything but doesn't have an obvious majority for any outcome, but whether that can be imposed on the government. And that we just don't know because we've never been in a situation like this before.
Now, talking to Stephen Kinnock, and there's clearly some traction for for this Norway Plus idea. Can you just explain that? That's about EFTA.
Yeah. Norway is essentially in the single market but not a member of the European Union. The reason they say Norway Plus is to avoid a border in Ireland. You don't just need the Norway solution, you need a customs union as well. And us being Britain will do a whole load of security cooperation that Norway doesn't do. The shortcoming of that, I suppose, is it will involve continued payments to the EU budget, it involves freedom of movement, and it is more intrusive on sovereignty than what Theresa May has got, because the European Court of Justice will have far greater reach, indirectly through the EFTA court, over what we do.
Now, the point of what everybody says about Theresa May's deal is it pleases neither side, Brexiteer or Remainer. For the Brexiteers, is there anything that Theresa May can stand up and say which will allay their fears, which have been the same fears they've been shown for the last 2 years?
Not on the basis of the documents she's brought back, no. What the Brexiters are saying is, this is Brexit in name only. We're tied to the customs union. And what some of them are saying is, we need someone who will go back to Brussels, say, this isn't good enough, we need to get rid of the backstop. What we need is a unilateral way of exiting the so-called Northern Ireland backstop. The problem with that is Theresa May has spent the last year trying to get that and has failed, and there is no chance, I don't think, that the EU would give in to that, whoever was negotiating for the UK.
You don't think there's any wriggle room here, because there are those suggesting that if Theresa May doesn't get it through, has to go back, that there may be something that can be offered?
Well, listen, there are all sorts of ways you can be creative with a document. If the EU was willing to reopen it, they could put in some positive words about how convinced we are that technology will inevitably solve the Irish border question one day, and so we won't need to deploy the backstop. That's fine, but it's not binding. What I don't think the EU will do, because they've made it a matter of principle, is say, OK, Britain, you can decide by yourselves when you no longer need the backstop, because I don't think Dublin will accept that.
OK. Great to talk to you, Hannah Menon. Thank you very much. So, the Prime Minister getting to her feet in about 15 minutes time or so, and we will of course take you into the Commons live for that. But in the referendum 2 years ago, Leeds was split down the middle. It voted to remain, but by one of the closest margins in the country. So what do people there make of Theresa May's deal? Our correspondent Fiona Trott has been finding out.
A chilly morning at Kirkgate Market in Leeds, but a warm response to Theresa May's message. People don't want to spend any more time arguing about Brexit.
We are fed up with arguing about it, and I think everyone's fed up about Parliament always arguing about it as well. So we're fed up, and then Wales fed up with them. So 2 times fed up.
Definitely people will be fed up, you know what I mean?
Are you fed up?
Oh yes I am, because it's been ages, you know, because we still don't know where we stand.
We voted out, get out. And all the people that are whinging about it, get over it. We voted to get out, just get out.
What about businesses? The Northern Power Partnership says the feeling in this region is that this deal is better than no deal.
I think the biggest fear that businesses have is of a hard Brexit, and then the reality of that would be really damaging, not just to the northern economy, but to the national economy, because key sectors like manufacturing are really important here, but they're also really important to the UK. And that's what's pushing businesses behind the Prime Minister's deal. I don't think that there's much enthusiasm for it, but for instance, when you talk to chambers of commerce like here in Western North Yorkshire, the consensus is that they would prefer that outcome because it would give them more certainty.
What does all that mean for people here in Leeds, though, at the market, who say they are noticing the price of things going up? Is there going to be prosperity for them in the future?
I think the reality of Brexit is it's a huge distraction from what we really need to do, which is to improve productivity here in the north of England. New figures released over the weekend show that we're still seeing lower levels of growth here than in London, despite the fact that that gap's closed. But sadly, a lot of that closing of the gap is currently because all of UK growth and prosperity is being held back by people being afraid of Brexit. Despite the fact, like in cities like here in Leeds, there's great fundamentals in the economy, people aren't investing as much as they would have done if Brexit hadn't have happened.
In this corner of northern England, which voted Remain, but only just, will they get behind the deal, or do they want a people's vote?
I think it should be a people's vote, definitely. Most certainly.
You've already had the referendum, the decision's been made, you don't want another one. I think we've already had a people's vote. Decision was made, Brexit. My understanding of Brexit was we walk away from a no deal in effect, we start again.
I don't trust any of the MPs, any of the government or anything, so I just really don't know.
So do you think then there should be a people's vote?
Like I said, I don't trust any of it. I don't trust any of it, so I don't know.
Here at the market, where Westminster, let alone Brussels, feels very far away, they seem to be backing the deal because they just want an end to negotiations. But will their MPs go along with that? When you walk around this market, people here will tell you that they care about how much their fruit and veg shop is going to cost them today, about whether or not they still have a job after Christmas, and that is why they seem to be backing this deal today, because they want an end to the negotiations. They think that for too long politicians have been concentrating on this negotiation process and not on the issues which they feel directly affect them. Last year around 20,000 migrant workers came to Leeds. Most of the migrant workers living in this city are from Eastern Europe, and we were speaking to an academic from Leeds University earlier who has studied the effects of Brexit on the international community here, and the first thing that she was talking about was hate crime in the north of England, which she directly relates to Brexit. She said it has increased, she said it remains high, and she was also talking about the effect on EU citizens living here. Although this deal says that their rights will be protected, she says they don't yet feel protected. Simon.
Fiona Trott there in Leeds, thank you very much. And don't forget, you can watch the Prime Minister addressing MPs in the Commons live here on the BBC News channel, due to start around past. I'm just seeing Gavin Williamson, the Defence Secretary, is still taking questions at the moment, but the Prime Minister scheduled to arrive here at the House of Parliament in the next 10 minutes or so, and will take your say into that chamber as soon as she does so. You're watching Afternoon Live. These are our headlines this afternoon. Theresa May has met her cabinet as she begins a campaign to sell her Brexit deal. She'll address MPs in the Commons shortly. Matthew Hedges, the academic jailed on spying charges in the United Arab Emirates, has been freed after receiving a presidential pardon. Ukraine's parliament is meeting to decide whether to bring in martial law after the capture of 3 of its naval vessels by Russia.
And in sports, England's beat Sri Lanka by 42 runs to claim a 3-0 series win. It's their first whitewash away from home since 1963. Andy Farrell will take over from Joe Schmidt as Ireland's rugby head coach after the New Zealander steps down following next year's World Cup. And Formula 3 driver Sophia Florsch says the high-speed crash which fractured her spine was her 2nd birthday as the teenager heads home from Macau to start what she's called a new chapter. I'll have more on those stories a little bit later.
A British academic who was jailed on alleged spying charges in the United Arab Emirates has been released and could be home tomorrow. Matthew Hedges was sentenced to life in prison last week. He's always protested his innocence, and his wife says she can't wait for him to come home after an experience she described as a nightmare. Richard Galpin's report contains some flash photography.
The 31-year-old PhD student, Matthew Hedges, will be able to return home to Britain as soon as formalities are completed, after spending months in prison in the United Arab Emirates. But despite pardoning him, the UAE government went on today to reinforce its message that Mr. Hedges had come to the country earlier this year to spy for the British intelligence agency MI6.
He was part-time PhD researcher, part-time businessman, but he was 100% a full-time Secret Service operative. During the investigation, Mr. Hedges confessed he was acting as an agent for a foreign intelligence service. He confirmed that he collected sensitive and classified information about the UAE.
Mr. Hedges' family deny all this, saying he came here to the UAE to research security and foreign policy issues for his PhD. The British government also dismisses the charges of spying which he faced.
Well, we've seen no evidence to support these accusations against Matthew Hedges, but today what we want to do is to thank them for the fact that they have reflected on the strong representations that we've made. We've made it very clear for a number of months now that we see no basis in these allegations. They've reflected on that, they've taken the action that they can, which means that Matthew Hedges is going to be reunited with his family.
For Mr. Hedges' wife, who'd campaigned hard for the Foreign Office to finally take action, it now seems the ordeal is over.
It's taken me by surprise, and I'm just so happy and so relieved, and
really incredulous that this is all happening finally. It's been an absolute nightmarish 6-7 months already, and I just can't wait to have him back.
The expectation couple will be together again quite soon. Richard Galpin, BBC News.
Ukraine's president has announced that the country will introduce martial law from Wednesday after Russian forces seized 3 of its navy vessels in the waters off Crimea. Moscow and Kiev are blaming each other over the incident in which a tug and 2 gunboats were captured and a number of Ukrainian crew members were injured. Both the EU and NATO have urged restraint. Our Moscow correspondent Steve Rosenberg has the details.
Off the coast of Crimea, Russian border guards on collision course with the Ukrainian Navy. Here, the Russians target a Ukrainian tugboat. The hint is less than subtle. Get out of these waters. There was more drama to come. Later, Russian forces shot at and seized the tug and 2 other Ukrainian vessels. This appears to be an SOS from one of the Ukrainian sailors as the Russians storm his boat. A Russian replies. The Ukrainian vessels were towed to Russian-controlled Crimea. More than 20 Ukrainian servicemen have been detained. The incident took place near the Crimean Peninsula by the Kerch Strait. Russia says Ukraine's navy illegally entered Russian waters. Ukraine denies it. This was the reaction in Kiev. Death to Russia, he shouts. Protests and pyrotechnics outside the Russian embassy. Ukraine's president denounced what he called Russia's aggression. Petro Poroshenko will ask Parliament to approve martial law to defend Ukraine against Russia. Moscow is refusing to take the blame. Russia's foreign minister accused Kiev of provocations. Sergei Lavrov said Ukraine's leaders were trying to score political points ahead of elections. To some, the incident is a reminder of just how dangerous the Russia-Ukraine conflict is.
The war continues to be live. And the war could escalate any moment, while endanger the relationship between Russia and the West.
With its show of force yesterday at sea and in the sky over the Kerch Strait, Russia has sent a clear message to Ukraine: don't mess with Moscow. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
Well, here in Westminster, we're all waiting for the Prime Minister to address Parliament after the EU effectively rubber-stamped her proposals for Brexit. Well, let's talk now to the pro-Brexit Conservative MP Priti Patel, former Cabinet Minister as well. Good afternoon to you. I know you're rushing over there yourself. So, if you were Theresa May, on a scale of 10, how hopeful would you be that this is a persuadable place?
Well, I think, quite frankly, from everything we're hearing, it's going to be very challenging to get this deal through at the meaningful vote. And I know that she and colleagues are working hard to try and sell this to the country, but actually it's Parliament that matters. It's having the debates in Parliament, but also demonstrating, certainly from my side, why this withdrawal agreement cannot be supported, because it doesn't take us out of Europe. It ties us into the rule-making, the institutions and of the European Union, such as the European Court of Justice, and of course the infamous backstop, which basically now has a whole host of customs implications and undermines the integrity of the Union.
So, fair to say, you don't care what she says this afternoon, you're voting against this?
Well, I've been clear already, and I've made my views known when the withdrawal agreement came out. I actually read the withdrawal agreement, and it's a difficult document. It's full of legal text, but it's pretty clear and very explicit in terms of how we are tied in. And I think the real, the sort of to add salt into the wounds with the political declaration that also came out, it's just a statement of aspiration. There is nothing solid there in terms of the actual deal that we are going to get from the European Union going forward. So if the public think that, Brexit is done, which is what the government are currently saying, that's simply not true.
What the public may be thinking, and what Theresa May be banking on, is just get something through. Just give us something, because frankly, we've had enough of this.
Sure, and I think the country has had enough of Brexit, there's no doubt about it, along with many of the protesters you have here. But the reality is the withdrawal agreement is a treaty. It'll be a treaty, so it's not a case of just get it through and then try and amend it later on. I think that this country and successive governments have tried that in the past and successfully failed. We're not in that position, and so we have one chance now, and that chance has to be to get this right, to look at how we can effectively bin the backstop, but go back and have that conversation, as the European Union are doing with many other third countries, on a Canada-style free trade
They've made it quite clear, haven't they? That is it. There is no coming back and renegotiating. There is no more movement. This is it. Jean-Claude Juncker, everybody,
sure.
They're all saying it.
Well, it's in their interest to say that, because they have successfully bullied Britain over the last 45 years to accept that comes out from them. That's simply not good enough. If we are going to stand up as a Conservative Party in government, deliver the type of Brexit this government has consistently pledged to deliver, then we do have to go back and talk about our political freedoms, our economic freedoms, our democratic freedoms, and get that agreement that means that we are open to the world and not shackled to the institutions of the European Union.
So, as far as you're concerned, would, on your list of favourites, crash out, stay in the EU?
I've never been an advocate of crashing out, and I think there have to be some really serious questions now asked to the government. What kind of preparation? Why have they not planned for no deal? 2 years in, you know, we'll get the economic impacts on Wednesday, potentially of a no deal scenario, which let's be clear, they're not going to be glowing. They'll be probably similar to the Treasury forecast we had as we went into the referendum. They should have done some planning and preparation. I've not been an advocate for no deal because I am a believer, and I've worked internationally myself as well, in the ability to get a free trading arrangement and an equal partnership. This is the point, an equal partnership, not my words, Mrs May's words, an equal partnership and a fair partnership where we are respecting each other but we have the freedoms to go out there in the world once we leave the European Union.
If you walked down Downing Street and she was walking towards you, what sort of relationship what would you say to her?
Well, to be fair, I mean, I do have discussions with the Prime Minister, and I've seen her over the last few weeks as well, tell a similar conversation on customs, the backstop, on the role of technology, having seen customs myself and worked in the private sector internationally, to talk about the way in which we can deliver the Brexit that we promised the country we would deliver, but also focus on trade, on international trade, open economies, open markets. Again, rather than having the EU will have a veto. They will have a say on whether or not we can have free trade agreements with other countries, and that's not right.
What do you say to your constituents who say, look, all you're doing is handing the keys to Jeremy Corbyn, the keys number 10?
Well, my constituents, many of them voted to leave. We're a heavy Leave constituency, and I don't want to see Jeremy Corbyn, and neither do my constituents. But actually, we stop Corbyn and we stop the politics that he proposes, his fantasy economics and all the rest of it, if we get out there and we fight for Britain, we fight for the Brexit that Conservatives in government promised that we would deliver.
I know you've got your running shoes on. You better start, because I think the Prime Minister just walked into the chamber, so I'm going to let you go.
Thank you.
Priti Patel, thank you very much. So, yes, as you can see, the Commons is filling up. The Prime Minister taking her seat, and we will be over there in the next few minutes as she addresses Parliament following the Brussels rubber stamping of her proposals. There she is next to Gavin Williamson, who's still taking defence questions. We'll be back there in just a moment, but in the meantime, let's find out what's happening with the weather. That is with Chris Fawkes.
Hello again. Many of us have had a dry day today, but across some eastern coasts of Scotland and England we have seen some showers here. They've not really been moving very far inland because there's no wind to push them along really, so that's where showers will continue to be as we look at the weather picture into this evening. Now through the evening and overnight the showers could get a bit heavier across eastern areas of Scotland, a bit of snow in the hills, so things could get a little bit slippery here for a time. It's going to be a chilly night as well, temperatures getting down into low single figures widely. However, where we do see some lengthy cloud breaks, temperatures dipping below, there'll be some patches of frost around. Signs of a change towards the southwest as we see a band of rain approach towards the end of the night. And that wet weather will make its presence felt across southwest England, Wales and Northern Ireland through the day on Tuesday. Ahead of the weather front, we're still into the cool air. A lot of dry weather, a few showers across northeastern areas of Scotland, but it is turning much milder into the southwest as we go through the day. That's your latest weather.
Well, there you are. There's the of Commons, and much atmosphere building there, because very shortly, the Prime Minister will be addressing MPs as she begins a long week as she tries to persuade people of the merits of her plan. So we're going to stay with the Commons because she is scheduled to speak to them very shortly. What is a very difficult week for her because, of course, on Wednesday, Prime Minister's questions, where she will face questions from both the opposition and within her own ranks, as she will this afternoon. Then on Thursday, well, let's join the Prime Minister now. I'll tell you what's going on the rest of the week a little later on. Here's the Prime Minister.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I would like to make a statement on the conclusion of our negotiations.
Order. Mr. Shannon, sort out your seating arrangements. Well done. And there's a long afternoon lies ahead. Let's have a bit of quiet and respectful order for the Prime Minister.
And with permission, I would like to make a statement on the conclusion of our negotiations to leave the European Union. At yesterday's special European Council in Brussels, I reached a deal with the leaders of the other 27 EU member states on a withdrawal agreement that will ensure our smooth and orderly departure on the 29th of March next year, and tied to this agreement a political declaration on an ambitious future partnership that is in our national interest. Mr. Speaker, this is the right deal for Britain because it delivers on the democratic decision of the British people. It takes back control of our borders, it ends the free movement of people in full once and for all, allowing the government to introduce a new skills-based immigration system. It takes back control of our laws, it ends the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice in the UK, and means instead our laws being made in our parliaments enforced by our courts. And it takes back control of our money. It ends the vast annual payments we send to Brussels. So instead we can spend taxpayers' money on our own priorities, including the £394 million a week of extra investment into our long-term plan for the National Health Service. By creating a new free trade area with no tariffs, fees, charges, quantitative restrictions or rules of origin checks, this deal protects jobs, including those that rely on integrated supply chains. It protects our security with a close relationship on defence and on tackling crime and terrorism, which will help to keep all our people safe. And it protects the integrity of our United Kingdom, meeting our commitments in Northern Ireland for the whole UK family, including our overseas territories and the Crown dependencies. Mr. Speaker, on Gibraltar, we have worked constructively with the governments of Spain and Gibraltar, and I want to pay tribute in particular to Gibraltar's Chief Minister, Fabian Picardo, for his statesmanship in these negotiations. We have ensured that Gibraltar is covered by the whole withdrawal agreement and by the implementation period. And for the future partnership, the UK government will be negotiating for the whole UK family, including Gibraltar. As Fabian Picardo said this weekend, and I quote, "Every aspect of the response of the United Kingdom was agreed with the government of Gibraltar. We have worked seamlessly together in this, as we have in all other aspects of this two-year period of negotiation. Most importantly, the legal text of the draft withdrawal agreement has not been changed. That is what the Spanish government repeatedly sought, but they have not achieved that. The United Kingdom has not let us down. Mr. Speaker, our message to the people of Gibraltar is clear. We will always stand by you. We are proud that Gibraltar is British, and our position on sovereignty has not and will not change. Mr. Speaker, the withdrawal agreement will ensure that we leave the European Union on the 29th of March next year in a smooth and orderly way. It protects the rights of EU citizens living in the UK and UK citizens living in the EU, so they can carry on living their lives as before. It delivers a time-limited implementation period to give business time to prepare for the new arrangements. During the implementation period, trade will continue on current terms, so businesses only have to face one set of changes. It ensures a fair settlement of our financial obligations, less than half of what some originally expected and demanded. And it meets our commitment to ensure there is no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, and also no customs border in the Irish Sea, in the event that the future relationship is not ready by the end of the implementation period. Mr. Speaker, I know some members remain concerned that we could find ourselves stuck in this backstop, so let me address this directly. First, this is an insurance policy that no one wants to use. Both the UK and the EU are fully committed to having our future relationship in place by the 1st of January 2021. And the withdrawal agreement has a legal duty on both sides to use best endeavours to avoid the backstop ever coming into force. If, despite this, the future relationship is not ready by the end of 2020, we would not be forced to use the backstop. We would have a clear choice between the backstop or a short extension to the implementation period. If we did choose the backstop, the legal text is clear that it should be temporary and that the Article 50 legal base cannot provide for a permanent relationship. And there is now more flexibility that it can be superseded either by the future relationship or by alternative arrangements, which include the potential for facilitative arrangements and technologies to avoid a hard border on the island of Ireland. There is also a termination clause which allows the backstop to be turned off when we have fulfilled our commitments on the Northern Ireland border. And there is a unilateral right to trigger a review through the Joint Committee and the ability to seek independent arbitration if the EU does not use good faith in this process. Furthermore, as a result of the changes we have negotiated, the legal text is now also clear that once the backstop has been superseded, it shall cease to apply. So if a future Parliament decided to then move from an initially deep trade relationship to a looser one, the backstop could not return. Mr. Speaker, I do not pretend that either we or the EU are entirely happy with these arrangements, and that's how it must be. Were either party entirely happy, that party would have no incentive to move on to the future relationship. But there is no alternative deal that honours our commitments to Northern Ireland which does not involve this insurance policy, and the EU would not have agreed any future partnership without it. Put simply, there is no deal that comes without a backstop, and without a backstop there is no deal. Mr. Speaker, the withdrawal agreement is accompanied by a political declaration which sets out the scope and terms of an ambitious future relationship between the UK and the EU. It is a detailed set of instructions to negotiators that will be used to deliver a legal agreement on our future relationship after we have left. The linkage clause between the withdrawal agreement and this declaration requires both sides to use best endeavours to get this legal text agreed and implemented by the end of 2020. And both sides are committed to making preparations for an immediate start to the formal negotiations after our withdrawal. The declaration contains specific detail on our future economic relationship. This includes a new free trade area with no tariffs, fees, quantitative restrictions or rules of origin checks, an unprecedented economic relationship that no other major economy has. It includes liberalisation in trade and services well beyond WTO commitments and building on recent EU free trade agreements. It includes new arrangements for our financial services sector, ensuring market access cannot be withdrawn on a whim and providing stability and certainty for our world-leading industry. And it ensures that we will leave EU programmes that do not work in our interests. So we will be out of the common agricultural policy that has failed our farmers and out of the common fisheries policy that has failed our coastal communities. Instead, as the political declaration sets out, we will be an independent coastal state once again. We will take back full sovereign control over our waters, so we will be able to decide for ourselves who we allow to fish in our waters. The EU have maintained throughout this process that they wanted to link overall access to markets to access to fisheries. They failed in the withdrawal agreement and they failed again in the political declaration. It is no surprise some are already trying to lay down markers again for the future relationship. But they should be getting used to the answer by now. It is not going to happen. Finally, the declaration is clear that whatever is agreed in the future partnership must recognise the development of an independent UK trade policy beyond this economic partnership. So for the first time in 40 years, the UK will be able to strike new trade deals and open up new markets for our goods and services in the fastest growing economies around the world. Mr. Speaker, as I set out for the House last week, The future relationship also includes a comprehensive new security partnership with close reciprocal law enforcement and judicial cooperation to keep all our people safe. At the outset, we were told that being outside of free movement and outside of the Schengen area would be treated like any other non-EU state on security. But this deal delivers the broadest security partnership in the EU's history, including arrangements for effective data exchange on passenger name records, DNA, fingerprints and vehicle registration data, as well as extradition arrangements like those in the European arrest warrant. And it opens the way to sharing the types of information included in the ECRIS and SIS2 databases on wanted or missing persons and criminal records. Mr. Speaker, this has been a long and complex negotiation. It has required give and take on both sides, and that is the nature of a negotiation. But this deal honours the result of the referendum, while providing a close economic and security relationship with our nearest neighbours, and in so doing offers a brighter future for the British people outside of the EU. And I can say to the House with absolute certainty that there is not a better deal available. And my fellow leaders were very clear on that themselves yesterday. Our duty as a Parliament over these coming weeks is to examine this deal in detail, to debate it respectfully, to listen to our constituents and decide what is in our national interest. There is a choice which this House will have to make. We can back this deal, deliver on the vote of the referendum and move on to building a brighter future of opportunity and prosperity for all our people. Or this House can choose to reject this deal and go back to square one. Because no one knows what would happen if this deal doesn't pass. It would open the door to more division and more uncertainty, with all the risks that will entail.